Hello, it's Kabo, and in this video I'll be showing you how to use a mod that I've developed so that you can find potential dungeon spawning locations. Now, if you aren't sure how this is actually useful, first check out Panda's Let's Play series, and then check out Dan's tutorial, and you'll see that you can actually create spawners and dungeons in survival if you know where they're going to generate ahead of time. And the idea behind this is that chunks can be loaded and you can place blocks in the chunks before they actually populate things like the structures and the ores and the caves and the dungeons. And by doing so, you can actually place blocks in locations that would make a dungeon generate. So the idea is 8 random positions are checked in a chunk, and if the blocks around that position match up with the right criteria, you can actually get a dungeon there. So after you've watched those videos, come back and look at this, and I'll show you how you can actually find the dungeons. Alright, so now I'm going to assume that you have watched the videos, that you've seen how Panda and Dan take those cobras, push them out, and you know the requirements for actually getting the structures to be built, how they have to have a roof and a floor and the walls and everything. So I'll push those sort of to the side for now, maybe we'll talk about them later, but now we want to talk about where to actually put the dungeons, because though it may have looked pretty easy, just push them out and there they go, there was actually quite a bit of work and testing that we had to do to find the locations. You can't just pick them randomly. If you do, you've only got a 0.02% chance of getting lucky and having a dungeon, and that's pretty small. So in order to do it right, you need to know the dungeon location beforehand and then use that location before you build the Cobra. So before we do anything else, we want to create a new world. Why do we want to do this? Because if we just went into the world that already exists and go and look for more locations, the problem is when we would go and build up the Cobra, push it into the location, well, that location's already been populated, so it wouldn't work. If you remember, this works because the chunks haven't been populated yet. So if you're in single player, go ahead and click recreate here. You'll see the seed should be the same as whatever you used for the world that you already created, and you can create a new world. If you're in multiplayer, you can just take a copy of the world and then find an unloaded area, or if you know the seed, use the seed. So let's go ahead and recreate the world here, and when we do, you'll see pretty much what you saw the first time you loaded up the world. Completely new world, nothing special in it, nothing built of course, and yeah, looks about the same. If we go to our menu here, there's this DBB option, and if we open this up, lots of settings, but the main one we want to focus on right now is just turning the mod on. So go down here, turn the mod on, and what you actually see is a bunch of colored boxes. These boxes represent any location that is possible for a dungeon to spawn, where the game will try to spawn a dungeon, where it will check around the position of the spawner, which is the position that it randomly picks, and try to see if all the walls and ceiling and everything meet the right conditions. So all the boxes here represent those places, and all the different colors represent the chunk that's actually trying to do the generation. So all of these magenta ones here would have been generated from the same chunk. All of the red ones right here would be generated by the same chunk. So you can sort of pick out the chunks that you want to use. The reason that this is important, of course, is because when a dungeon succeeds, all the dungeons that would form after it would not form in the same place. So if we look at the number of dots inside of the spawner here, we see we have 6, and come over here, look at the dots here, we have 8. So if we came over here and set up a Cobra to push into this location, we pushed it in, we got it to work, and it generated a dungeon. The next time the game would pick a dungeon location for 7, it wouldn't be in the same place as the 7th one, and for 8, this one here, it wouldn't be in the same place. So that's why the number and the order of the dungeon is important, and why the color here is important as well. So to make it easy, if you just want to generate dungeons, look for different colored dungeons and try to line those up, and that will be the easiest way that you can sort of get this to work with different colors. But there are lots of other ways to do this, and lots of other things you can do. So I'll go into that and explain all the details of the mod. So just let me fly over to a little clearer of an area, and we can get into those. Alright, so now I'm out in the ocean here, and as you can see, it's a lot easier to tell where all the boxes are and sort of how they're distributed without the terrain in the way. Also, you probably want to go out to the ocean anyway because some of the terrain features like trees and ores and lava lakes and stuff can end up influencing spawners if they happen in the different orders and stuff. So tend to look for oceans because they're going to give you the most reliable results. So right here we're over an ocean, and let's just talk about first quickly what this actually means, what all this information that's coming from any particular box means. So of course we have a box here, and I've already marked out a few things inside of it. We've got the color, which I already mentioned. This is the chunk that generates the spawner or the dungeon. So in this case it's dark gray, so all of the dark gray here, this one, and those three up here, all of those would be generated by the same chunk. And then you've got this outer box. This outer box tells us the actual bounds, and you can see that those are marked out here. You can see that this particular dungeon is going to be a 7 by 7. You can see it's 7 in both the X and the Z, but it could also be a 7 by 9 going in this direction, or a 7 by 9 going in this direction. It could also, of course, be a 9 by 9. So the size of the dungeon can vary quite a bit, so it doesn't have to be this small. Then you've got the interior box here. This represents where the spawner would actually be if the dungeon did generate. And inside of that, you've got a dot. And this dot I've already mentioned. Once again, this is the order or the number of the dungeon generation in the chunk. So for example, if I did actually place all the blocks that I needed as they are right here, for example, to generate this dungeon, then what we would see is all the dungeons that followed would not be in the same positions. So the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, and 8th dungeons, they wouldn't be lined up like this. They would all be randomly in different positions because this one would change the generation positions, the randomness. So that's general idea of the information behind one particular dungeon bounding box. And as you can see, we've got quite a few of them, a lot of them. Actually, we have so many of them that it's probably a bit mind-boggling and can make you dizzy. Kind of hard to tell what's going on. So in order to sort of help make it a little easier, if you can't really tell what's going on and it's hard to see, I've added quite a few options to help find things and make it easier for you. So if you go to dungeon bounding box settings here, you can see we've got color options here. And as you might expect, this turns on and off the colors. So you can see the blue there. If we go and find blue, turn it off, you can see it's no longer showing blue. We can do this with any of them. So if I were to just go through and just flick off a bunch of these, just leave magenta on, you can see all that's left is magenta. And you can see how easy it is to find them, how they're lined up by the chunks where they're generated. Pretty easy to see and pretty easy to make use of. Now, there's pretty spread out the clusters here, so you can see this one would be a chunk, that one would be a chunk. This is done intentionally so that it's easy to tell which chunk generates which. And as I said, this is important because the order is important. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to place a spawner at place the blocks that are necessary at every point in here and hope to get a spawner in all of them. You'd probably only get one, if even any at all. So it doesn't really work that way. It's most ideal to, let's say, look at maybe a 2x2 area of chunks and say, okay, let's pick out different colors that are nearby each other, and each different color we can do a different chunk. So that might be the easier way of doing it. And I've actually added a tool to make that easy as well. So let's go ahead and turn everything back on so it's all chaotic like it was before. But if we go here, you'll see there's also this in range option. Now what this does, well, there are two things you can do. First, if we just turn it on, what it will show us is all of the spawners that are currently within the range of a player. So if I'm standing here, you can see we've got some blue spawners which are in range. We've got a purple spawner in range, a red one, and a black one. Two black ones. Oh no, another red one too. Then you'll see these dotted lines out in the back. These are ones that are nearby, but not quite in range. So if I move over here, you can see when it gets highlighted, it is in range. So now we're in range of blue one, purple one, red one, and the cyan one. So you can move around, sort of pick out your locations a little easier with this bounding box, sort of get an idea of where things are. And of course, if you want to see a more general view, sort of get an idea of everything, switch it off. Now, You can also turn off these nearby ones and just see the ones that are directly within range. So no longer is it showing ones that are sort of close by and we might be able to get in range. Now it's just showing the ones that are definitely in range. So these are the ones if you want to have like a quad spawner like Panda did. The easiest way, of course, would just be say, make this one spawn, make that one spawn, this one, and there's a quad spawner. So that's one way of doing it. Now let's go ahead and turn the nearby back on, and we've also got, or turn the range off. We've also got a few more options here. So we have this distance implies size thing here. This is mostly just for handling lag, because currently what I'm doing is calculating the size of the lines that are drawn based on the distance. So you can see those lines are much thinner than the ones that are in the foreground. I can of course change that, turn this off. Might draw a little faster, so if that's slow for you, you can see it changes the drawing size, so the ones in the background are the same size as the one in the foreground. It's a little harder to see, perhaps, a little harder to judge distance, but in this case it may be a little bit faster and easier for your computer because it doesn't have to do that distance calculation. In my case, my computer can handle it, so I'll just leave it there. Then we've also got this chunks option, and what this does is, well, as you can see, now we have an additional set of lines here. This is telling us the chunk. So first thing you'll notice is this blue chunk does not line up with the blue box. This red chunk doesn't always line up with the red boxes. Now, I don't know if Panda explained this, but the problem is it actually offsets the dungeon position by +8 in both the X and the Z. So this chunk is the one that generates the black boxes there, but it's not necessarily going to generate them inside of the chunk that is doing the generation. So kind of weird, but that's the way it works. So this can sort of help you find that if it does become a problem for you, like if you aren't able to quite generate things right, maybe take a look at this and it may help you out a bit. This is more of an advanced tool, sort of gives you an idea of how things are laid out. So you may make use of this later, but for now, just keep in mind that they aren't lined up with the actual boxes, and this is a tool that can help you out if you do run into issues there. Alright, what else do we have? So let's turn that chunks off. Oh yeah, also this does sort of work with the range finder too, so you can see this chunk is within range and all this information as well. Though this particular thing isn't quite important, but maybe it makes it a little easier to see when you have the range function on. I don't know. Anyway, let's switch that off and switch range off. And lastly, we have one more option, and that is to clear the cache. So what are we seeing right now? Well, what we're seeing is actually all of the ones that got populated, all the chunks that got populated generate a dungeon and they get added to a list. And this list is saved between Minecraft games. So if I were to actually leave this game and come back in, it would be there as long as I don't close my Minecraft client. If I close the client, all of that information would disappear because the cache would be cleared. So let me go ahead and demonstrate that. If I save and quit to title and go back into copy of test, when it reloads the world, you can see all the boxes that were there before get reloaded because they've been saved. If I were actually to close my Minecraft and reload it, they would be gone. They wouldn't be there anymore. What we can do is manually clear it with this clear cache button. This is useful if you're going from one world to another, you don't want to close your Minecraft session, or if you're doing a lot of testing and just want to clear it before you do anything else. So keep that in mind. This is sort of a more advanced thing. If you don't need to know this constantly and just need to do it once, then don't worry about it. You'll be probably reloading the map quite a few times. You'll be creating new maps with the same seed just to make sure you find the right locations and everything. So it isn't really necessary unless you're doing stuff like a lot of testing or testing, for example, multiplayer. So now, about multiplayer. This does and doesn't work in multiplayer. So it does work because it does draw boxes in multiplayer, and it doesn't work because it doesn't draw boxes based on multiplayer. So here's the trick. If you want to see in multiplayer what you would see in single player, you'd have to load it in single player first. Don't clear the cache. don't exit Minecraft and then load up the multiplayer world and then you can see them. Not really a good representation of what you see in multiplayer, but it's, for now, the only way I'm going to make the mod do this. It's really going to be difficult otherwise, because the problem is, if you're trying to build this up in multiplayer, try to do this on a server with a lot of people, you're going to have to constantly reset things and reset things and reset things every time you test. So for now, I'm just going to leave it as it is. With the cache here, you can clear it or not clear it if you want. Maybe in the future I'll even add a button to no longer load things into the cache, so it will just not allow things to get loaded. But for now, this is your option. Just play around with it. I'm sure you'll get used to it in time. But that's really all. A few disclaimers. If you're using a version of Minecraft that is not supported by the mod, then I cannot guarantee that it will work properly. It might not give you the right locations. So these, for example, if for some reason you were able to get this to work in 1.6.2, they would probably be the right locations, but I won't guarantee it. Also, in 1.7, they're going to change the dungeon generation, so this will change for 1.7, things like that. You need to make sure you're using the right versions, of course. Also, if you are using a modded version of Minecraft that somehow affects dungeon generation, this will definitely not be accurate. So you may want to avoid those. Modded servers may not be accurate either. Bucket, Spigot, I'm not sure if those will be accurate. So you're taking your chances if you're using modded versions, but we do know that this works in vanilla. We know it works with unmodded versions of Minecraft. Everything will line up properly. So just keep those things in mind. Anyway, that's all. I hope this mod is useful. I hope you can get it to find locations of dungeons and actually generate dungeons on your own. And look forward to anything new that the ZipCrowd guys bring you with this. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And I'll see you next time. Bye.